Brethren, please rise for the invocation. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom, O hidden light, shining in every creature, O hidden love, embracing all in oneness, may all who feel themselves as one with Thee know they are therefore one with every other. Please be seated. We will start the meeting now. There is a wonderful gift that nature has given to all of us, which is a sense of cooperation and ability to coexist. And this capability has been evolving over a period of time. And when I said us, it includes several species, including that of plant, animal, and even humans. There is an unwritten code of ethical values that these species have been adopting over a period of time as evolution progressed, and there is a constant evolutionary pressure that all the species had felt in various points of time. Now we will see how this evolution of ethics has progressed from time to time, and we will hear from Dr. Manu Jaiswal, who is with us. And Dr. Manu Jaiswal, he is a professor from Indian Institute of Technology, Chennai, Madras, IIT Madras, as you know. He has completed his PhD from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and post which he has taken up several initiatives in postdoctoral stints in Germany and also Singapore, after which he joined IIT Madras back, and he has been teaching several subjects of science in various spectrums, but he also specialized in physics. He has specialized in classical physics, quantum physics, and also physics of matter. He is also a deep student of philosophy, and he has been lecturing on subjects which is related to science, philosophy, and theosophy. So without much ado, I would like to invite Dr. Manu Jaiswal to take over and speak to us. Dr. Manu Jaiswal.
Good evening all, and thank you Mr. Vinay Patri for the kind introduction and for extending this invitation to me. Ethics is something which has bothered all of us. We have a sense of what is right and wrong, good and bad. I'll begin straight away with a small story which will highlight a particular aspect. So, you see a picture of an earthen bowl on a lonely mountain, and this story is from Khalil Gibran. On a lonely mountain, there lived two hermits who loved each other and who also loved God. Then one day an evil spirit entered the heart of the older hermit. He went to the younger hermit and said, "It is time for us to part. So let us bring our possessions, divide them. I would like to go." The younger hermit was saddened, but he said, "Okay, brother, if that is your wish, let us go ahead." The only possession they had between them was one earthen bowl, which is pictured here. The younger hermit said, "You can keep this bowl. There is no point in dividing it." The older hermit, in whose heart the evil spirit had entered, remarked, "I won't accept this. The bowl must be divided because I do not accept any charity." The younger hermit tried to reason, if you divide it, it is neither good for you, it can't be used by you, it can't be used by me. So why don't we cast a lot? Then what was the response of the older hermit? The older hermit said, I do not trust justice to vain chance. I want justice and mine own. The bowl must be divided. Now what do you do? The younger hermit was further saddened, but he said, okay brother, let us divide the bowl. At that point, the older hermit's face grew exceedingly dark, and he said, "O cursed coward, you refuse to fight." The point that emerges from this story is something we have all experienced. This is the primitive, egoistic self which refuses to acknowledge the existence of anybody else, will go to any extent to promote their own selfish interest, simply does not see the other person. And in different ways, this primitive, egoistic self manifests in the form of various unethical practices, dishonesty, stealing, speaking lies, whatever comes. At the heart of all unethical behavior lies this primitive, egoistic self, on which H.G. Wells, the famous writer, has remarked in his book Outlines of History, make men and women sufficiently jealous, sufficiently angry, drunken, or afraid, and then you will find that the hot red eyes of cavemen will glare out at you. We have teaching, we have science, we have tamed the beast and schooled the lightning, but we are still to tame ourselves. We are only shambling towards light. This is what he says. This also tells us what is ethics. Ethics is an inner discord against this primitive spirit. Ethics is an internal fight where you realize that the other is also important. And in terms of evolution, it represents the transition from this primitive, egoistic self to a social animal. So let us look at this transition in more detail. This is the key summary of what I proposed in the beginning, and I'll highlight this throughout the talk. Ethics and inner discord against our primitive ego, and ethics is an allowance for others. The degree of allowance can vary. It can be a small allowance, or you can have universal compassion. It varies a lot across individuals. And we are in a yet incomplete evolutionary phase. We have not come to the final state. So as the transition happens from the primitive egoistic being to the social animal, we get a variety of responses across different individuals. A good part of the initial part of my talk will be based on this idea, an article written by Schrödinger, a Nobel laureate and quantum physicist, natural philosopher. He wrote this 90 years ago on what is an objective viewpoint on ethics. How does ethics arise? What do I mean by objective viewpoint? The more popular subjective viewpoint is as follows. One says that ethics is there because God made some moral code, and it is the duty of man to propagate this moral code. So one may ask, which moral code? Because there are different religions, but even if you ignore those differences, this presupposes a lot of things, that there is already a well-decided end goal that God has decided, and all that remains is for us to work towards that goal. This may be accepted or denied, but there cannot be much discussion on this point because this is based on your individual belief. So I will stay away from this particular subjective viewpoint. I'll focus on objective viewpoint, which is based on empirical evidences and logical reasoning. which is what Schrödinger proposed as the evolutionary transition of humans. Let's look at this in more details. You might say, what has ethics to do with evolution? Ethics is something we practice during our short lives. Evolution happens gradually over billions of years. Why should they be connected? The connection lies if we understand our ethical dilemmas are a major part of consciousness, our consciousness. I'll give a short introduction. What is consciousness? Which is important to understand the relation between ethics and evolution. Imagine you are driving a car, the busy traffic of Chennai. You're going from your home to work, and on a familiar route, so many thoughts occupy your mind. You're thinking about your work, your family. You're even having arguments with people who don't exist physically. You imagine them. But the miracle is, all that time, the car has correctly followed all the route and landed you at the correct destination. Which tells there are various levels of consciousness. The primary consciousness is all these thoughts, including the ethical dilemmas or arguments you have in your mind. Then lower down the consciousness ladder, something which is driving the car, which you barely notice. Then there are things even lower down on the consciousness ladder. And what are those? Your breathing, your heartbeat, which you no longer notice. I say no longer because maybe in the evolutionary process, at some time that would have been the major part of consciousness. Now it has been pushed down. We barely feel it. What we feel are the core thoughts, and among those core thoughts, ethics occupies a very important position. So let's look at this example. Having introduced what is consciousness, how are evolution and consciousness related? I'll give one example. It is believed that not everyone can digest milk as an adult. There are certain populations which can digest better and in whose daily diet milk is an important thing. Whereas there are other populations which cannot digest milk so well. So some research papers have shown that few thousand years ago, there was a mutation, a gene mutation, which allowed people to digest milk. It's not enough to have the gene mutation, because you also need to at the same time develop new habits, new ideas to transform from a hunter-gatherer to a pastoralist. It cannot happen just by a gene mutation. Along with the gene mutation should come new ideas that you can manage these cattle, you can milk them, you can store the milk, drink the milk. So the idea is that consciousness is the core part of evolution. The behavior is not different from what gene mutation is telling us. This is very much in sync with Darwin's theory of evolution. So in this Venn diagram, I've tried to illustrate the relation between ethics, consciousness and evolution. Ethics, ethical dilemmas are a major part of our consciousness, and consciousness lies in the zone of evolution. It's still growing. Though what we learn in one life does not get transmitted to the next generation, but the collective balloon of ideas keeps growing, and that is what is taken forward. So the relationship is not so direct. Now let us look at ethics in various animal societies, and bees have evolved millions of years ago. They reached the final stage of evolution. They are not evolving any further, and there are interesting reasons for that they possess an outer skeleton which is fixed, which limits their further evolution. In honeybees, as you may know, the prime position is occupied by the queen bee. And apart from that queen bee, there are workers. The queen bee does the job of laying all the eggs. The workers are children of the queen bee. And the workers do all the job of getting the pollen, creating this honeycomb, and They also take care of the eggs, the larvae, so that more workers can be created. In principle, and this is very interesting, in principle, every larva can become the queen bee. But it does not, because the other workers limit its food in such a way that it only develops as another worker, does not develop as a bee, because only one queen is needed. You don't need two queens in a hive. So we end up with large number of workers whom you might think, are they like slaves? I will answer that question. They are not like slaves. They are children of the queen bee, and instead of taking care of their own young ones, they are taking care of their siblings. The other workers are their siblings. So in this society, there is perfect harmony. The workers have given up their ego. They do not have any dissent. And you might feel that the bee society is an ideal society. Should human society be like that? We'll look at it. I was trying to answer that do not think these are like slaves. Though they could have a better future as queen, they become workers. Even in ants, you have a similar situation. Ants also form colonies like bees. And recently some experiments were done by researchers in the University of Lausanne, Switzerland, where they studied what happens when you put ants in social isolation. The research happened around the same time as we were placed in COVID isolation. Just a coincidence maybe. So they've noticed that ants which are provided abundant food, place to roam around, but no partners, their lifespan is only 1/10 of the lifespan of other ants. These ants live only for 6.5 days. What was the reason? They have all the food. Yet, they could not digest that food. It turns out there could be two reasons. We can never be certain. Either they died searching for a relative with whom to break the bread with. State of mind of the ant can't be read. But there is an other objective explanation. Ants regurgitate the food. And many different ants eat the same food so that the fluid is exchanged, which helps in the digestion. If there is only a single ant, the digestion is disrupted. So these creatures have long given up the idea of solitary existence. They cannot survive. They have to have food together. They have to break bread together in order to live. I also noticed that in human children studying in school, they exchange food a lot, and that creates happiness and helps to digest food. Some comparison. But then, ant society is not always harmonious. We'll see the problems. There are some special bees called as guard bees. Picture shows here, halt. Who goes there? Where are your identity papers? The cuticle of ants have some odor, pheromones. And those are particular to the individual but also to the hive, because it depends on the queen bee's pheromones, the wax, the pollen they use, so that they can be identified by odor. Now, usually the bees return to their own hive, but sometimes the wind is strong, they end up in a different hive. And then this happens, what is shown on the picture. If your identification is wrong, you are killed on the spot. The ethics, if there is any ethics, the behavior of bees is different for their own community as compared to a bee from a different hive. Not only that, there are wars of the bees. It is known that our own Indian bees fight, but the Australian sting bees fight the most. Entire community invades another hive. The fighting goes for months. They kill many bees. And at the end, if they are successful, they install their own queen. There is harmony to some extent, but then the wars of bees have been going on for millions of years. That is because in bees there is no internal discord. Every bee is the same. They don't think. They do a certain job inside their hive, they do a different job outside their hive. Then we should also look at one more society before I go to humans, and that is the society of chimpanzees. Why chimpanzees? You can see from this evolutionary tree, they are the closest of all animals to humans. So what we learn from chimpanzees has implications for us, the understanding of human society. A lot of work was done, pioneering work was done by the primatologist Jane Goodall, who is pictured here. Among the things they discovered, the first ever picture of a non-human working with a tool, a specially created tool to dig out termites, that is depicted on this slide. And this research, I'll just give you the scale of the work done in the next slide. Genealogy of chimpanzees, families of chimpanzees, mothers, their sons and daughters and so on. It runs from 1950. There is still a chart today. I've picked up the older one, the original one. So many decades they have collected this data, studying individuals. Study of individuals is important in chimpanzees compared to ants, because there is a lot of individual behavior. Just like humans, there is a lot of individual behavior. Chimpanzees are important from the reason they are closer to man. Their life cycle is similar to ours. There is childhood, adolescence, then adulthood. Their lifespan is about 40 to 50 years. And then they are having extreme emotional bonding between mother and child, and also between the siblings, which lasts the entire lifetime. So these are many reasons. They also have a similar brain structure as humans. To give an example of extreme emotional bonding, you can see this young chimpanzee pictured here. The mother of this chimpanzee had died, and after that, this young chimpanzee had lost the interest to live. The expression itself is there on the face, and it came to the same spot and died within 3 weeks. That's the extreme emotional bonding they have. And also pictured there is the sister of that young chimpanzee who is trying to somehow take care of this situation where this chimpanzee refuses to respond, refuses to eat. But then there are good chimpanzees, there are also bad chimpanzees. It's very individualistic behavior. So in the society of chimpanzees, once the number reaches about 20, that's a large number for them. They have to divide and split up in, say, 2 groups of 10 each or 12 each. They define their territories. Then there are certain aggressive ones which form the border patrol party. They always roam around the border, ensuring nobody enters inside. Like, halt, who goes there once more? Not just for bees, but also for chimpanzees. Not just a patrol, but what was documented was systematic territorial conflict, where they laid a trap for isolated chimpanzees. These groups of border patrol parties, they laid a trap. They would murder, there would be cannibalism, and there was complete extermination of another community, all the male members. Once all the male members were eliminated, these chimpanzees expanded their territory in search of better resources. So this has been very nicely documented. You can see here the territorial conflict between Kasakela and Kahama chimpanzees has been documented in 1974. They started the research in 1960. This evidence came after 15 years of research, the first time. And then, as I said, there are good and bad chimpanzees. So after one of these chimpanzees had been badly mauled, struggling to live, there are compassionate chimpanzees such as the one depicted here. I'm trying to highlight the individualistic behavior. This one is trying to remove the flies from the wounds of this dying chimpanzee, which has been attacked, shown in the previous picture. So these have lessons, because this also is the dark side of human beings. Whatever is shown here, you can think, are we talking about chimpanzees or bees, or are we talking about human beings? There is some commonality which we can see objectively. So I have borrowed this title from Professor Bhaskaran. I attended a talk, the title of which was Are We Bees? Well, the same question is asked, are we bees? But the context is different. Are we bees? And this, let's pay attention to this. You can also say to be or not to be. The bees have harmony in their limited society, but they are not aware that wars have been going on for millions of years. Individual bees have no ego. They have given up the ego. They serve the queen. And when there is a war across the hives, they fight to death. They have no fear. In some relations, we are bees because we also form different communities, different sects, nations which fight amongst themselves. But in human beings, the ego has not vanished. We still have partial ego. We are not like bees in some way. For instance, two beehives which are fighting with each other. The third beehive can enjoy the pollen for some time. Good days have come. Then, what happens next? The fighting, the war comes to their doorstep. They are not aware of it. They have been fighting for millions of years. We as humans know if two nations fight, sooner or later that war will come to our doorstep. We may stay aloof, but we are part of mankind. Anything happening anywhere else will eventually affect us. So thank God we are human because that gives us hope. Human beings have inner discord. They feel for everyone they have, or for some beings it is developed much more. They feel that these wars have to stop. And the right ethical behavior which will bring social harmony is when the whole world sits in harmony. So let's look at ethics and inner discord in human societies after having seen what happens in bees and chimpanzee societies. Here I have picked up a few stories to illustrate some important points. This one is the inner discord of Dighavu. Some of you may have heard this story. It's from the Buddhist texts. It is said that Buddha narrated this story to a group of quarreling monks when he was at Kosambi, which is in UP, present day UP. And the story goes as follows. There was a king of Banaras, King Brahmadatta, who was very rich and powerful. And there was another king, his neighbor, the king of Kosal, King Digiti, who wasn't so powerful. Naturally, war happened between them and Brahmadatta conquered Digiti's empire. Digiti and his wife fled and they went into exile. They went to various places and finally they found refuge with a potter. The potter was in Banaras. Now, all the time, this king in exile used to think, someday the truth will come out. In the meanwhile, a son was born to them called Dighavu. They wanted to protect the son, so at a very early age, they sent the son to outskirts of the city. The son started growing up. Meanwhile, once a barber betrayed the secret. And then when King Brahmadatta came to know that this king in exile is living in my same city, with my capital city, he decided to get them imprisoned and executed. While they were being taken for execution, Dighavu comes there and there is not much time for interaction, but the father gave only a one-line lesson or one-line summary of gist of his life's learning. He said, which is written here, not by hatred is hatred appeased, only by love is hatred appeased. He wanted to convey something to his child, the last dying message. After that, the former king and queen were executed, and Dighavu always lived with this idea that he had to take revenge for the killers of his parents. He grew up with this idea and he thought, but then there was this inner discord, because all ethics comes from inner discord. His father's message would flash in his mind which said, no hatred. His hatred would rise and then again subside, and which went on for years. At one point of time, he decided, I will join the household of the king, King Brahmadatta. He was not clear why he would join. Will he join to take revenge, or will he join to prove his father right? He didn't know, but he joined. What he did, he became an apprentice to the king's Mahavat, and then he sang such nice songs that the king invited him to the palace. Then he became very close to the king. He started accompanying the king to various expeditions. Finally, on one such expedition, he was alone with the king, a hunting expedition. The king was tired. He took rest on the lap of Digavu. There was no one else around. Once more, that bout of revenge came in Digavu, and he took out his sword and said, I'll chop off his head. This is the time. The murderer of my parents, I have to take revenge. But then the moment he took out, his father's words flashed in front of his eyes, and then he again put the sword back. Once more he took it out, the same cycle repeated. The third time he couldn't control himself, and he shook the king awake, was sleeping in his lap, and said, I am Digavu, the son of King Digiti, whom you had killed. Now your time has come. Say your last prayer, because I am about to kill you. Then what happens? Suddenly, once more, his father's words flashed in his eyes. He saw the whole world, the past, the future, everything in front of him. And he felt life, death, love, hatred, all like dewdrops on a lotus leaf. At that moment, his anger completely vanished. But he didn't loosen the grip. He explained to King Brahmadatta that I am sparing you because of my father. I could have killed you, but try and understand. And he realized this cycle of violence has to be broken by somebody. And his remarks were, if I kill you today, you have killed my father. If I kill you today, your followers will kill me. This process will go on. There will be no end. By sparing your life today, you have spared mine indirectly. So let us be friends. The story ends happily because Brahmadatta was an understanding person, which is important. Otherwise, Brahmadatta would have killed him. The story ends on a happy note. But if you think about it, well, it could have ended differently. I thought about it. Why should it end this way? It could be that he spares. Digavu is extremely emotional, reflective. He may forgive. But what about the king? Sooner or later, he can get him killed. That is where we should compare with Hamlet. Because something else happens in Hamlet. There is a good parallel between these stories. In Hamlet, his father is murdered. By whom? None other than his uncle. Hamlet's father was the king of Denmark. His uncle Claudius becomes the king of Denmark. And not only that, also marries his mother, Hamlet's mother, who is now the queen. All this is revealed by the ghost of his father. And then Hamlet is torn. Again, there is inner discord. He doesn't go to immediate justice. He reflects what is right. So many questions are asked by him throughout the play. He asks, for instance, to be or not to be, to live, to die. So many questions he has about different values. And that is why he delays and dithers and postpones his revenge. Though he doesn't doubt that he has to take revenge. He has to take revenge, but in what form? And there are important differences between this story and that, because Hamlet is not Digavu and definitely Claudius is not Brahmadatta. Here, look at the approach he follows. He doesn't go to kill Claudius directly. He uses an inner play. In the outer play, there is an inner play where, to test the to test the truth, he does this inner play in front of King Claudius. In the inner play, the same murder is repeated, which is done by pouring poison in the ears of his father. When this is played, it hurts, it appeals to the conscience of King Claudius. And not only that, he appealed to the conscience of many characters. He was the only reflective person in the entire play. In this tragedy, all the key characters die, but you don't feel anything for the other characters who are very shallow, who have no reflective tendencies. Hamlet is the only one who had such deep reflective tendencies. So what is different I have explained, but what is common in these two stories, the appeal to the conscience of the enemy or whoever is hurting you. Dikavu did that to Brahmadatta, Hamlet did that to King Claudius. The results are completely different, but you can see where ethics is operational. Ethics is operational, so many different answers are possible. There is no one answer, what should I do? But the inner discord automatically guides you on what you should do. If there is inner discord, there is ethics. This from literature, but we also know from a person who was there in flesh and blood and who also visited and blessed this very place where this program is organized. That was in 1914, I believe. This Mahatma Gandhi had, it's worth reading this few lines, which are from this Gujarati poet Shamal Bhatt. He wrote in 1700s. For a bowl of water, give a goodly meal. For a kindly greeting, bow thou down with zeal. For a simple penny, pay thou back with gold. If thy life be rescued, life do not withhold. Thus the words and actions of the wise regard, every little service tenfold thy reward. This is for the common man, and the last two are for people who can take their level higher. The truly noble know all life is one, which is what Dikavu was also saying, all life is one, and return with gladness, good for evil done. And he put this in practice. Mahatma Gandhi said that this was his guiding principle. He put this in practice in his satyagrahas. Again, what was he doing? He was not only appealing to Indians, he was appealing to the conscience of the British and the Western people. He was trying to appeal to the conscience of everyone in the world. So this common thread you see across very different stories, taken from different traditions. A Buddhist story of Mahatma Gandhi, or Shakespeare's Hamlet. There is a common thread across all of them, that is appealing to the conscience of your enemy and having inner discord. Last point I'll touch upon, we must recognize the difference between ethical code and inner discord. Throughout this talk, I have emphasized ethics is related to inner discord, which is different from ethical code. Ethical code is important. Various learned people have provided us rules and laws for ethics. But they have learnt this through their own inner discord. Now, if we adopt ethical codes without reflecting deeper on it, then there are contradictions. For example, I know of some people who are extremely kind to ants, extremely kind to animals. But then when thousands of people are dying somewhere in a war, they'll say this is geostrategic, this is important. So that cannot be, because you are lacking inner discord. Your non-violence is a ritual. If non-violence is a ritual, then these paradoxes happen. So this is also pictorially depicted here, just a representational picture. I'll conclude with this thought again on ethical code versus inner discord. Ethical code is important to create the inner discord, but by itself it should not become a ritual. This is from Khalil Gibran. I started with Khalil Gibran, I am ending with Khalil Gibran. Who can spread his hours before him saying, this for God and this for myself? this for my soul, this other one for my body. All your hours are wings that beat through space from self to self. He who wears his morality but has his best garment were better naked. The wind and sun will tear no holes in his skin. And he who defines his conduct by ethics, most important, he who defines his conduct by ethics imprisons his songbird in a cage. The freest song comes not through bars and wires. The inner discord produces the freest song. And he to whom worshipping is a window to open but also to shut has not yet visited the house of his soul, whose windows are open from dawn to dawn. Thank you for your attention. I'll be glad to take questions or discussion or any comments. Right. In different contexts, different definitions have been used. The definition which I have chosen is from Schrodinger's views, and which says that ethics is an inner discord against the primitive egoistic self. It is also an allowance for others, which contributes to our existence as a social animal. Right. So when it comes to institutions, unfortunately institutions tend to remove the internal discord. Institution lays down laws which makes you feel I can follow the law, I need not think. That is where paradoxes, contradictions happen, and some behavior which may be termed as legal but unethical can happen. So one has to reflect, not follow the law, appreciate the law, why it was made, and then come to a conclusion after deep reflection. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I believe in future there will be no armies, no nations. We will reach that stage where all mankind will live at peace with each other. We are in that evolutionary transformation. Yes, absolutely. Ethics of dreaming. Yeah, it may or may not happen, we cannot be, but there is hope, because the hope is in bees, there is no hope. Bees have been fighting for millions of years. They have reached a certain harmony, but individual bees have no ego. They don't feel for a bee of other hive. We humans do feel for bees of other hive. And that is what creates some hope. Of course, it can end up in a disaster. They say the world may blow up in a nuclear catastrophe, but maybe there is some chance. Contemplation is key, because consciousness or ethics are in the zone of evolution, new ideas coming, and this is not yet settled. Therefore, there are so many different ideas. And as you rightly pointed out, that contemplation is key to evolution, because we have not reached that final state. Bees have reached that final state. They don't contemplate, they do. They act, and they act in ways which are paradoxical. For us, we contemplate, and there is hope of universal peace. We can compare and contrast. I have done that. I have shown what is similar in their behavior. You are touching upon the microscopic mechanism, but I am looking at their outward behavior, what one can observe. They fight, they kill, we can see that. So there is comparison, there is also a contrast, some similarity between bees and humans, between chimpanzees and human. You can also see that common thread of creating groups and trying to protect themselves, which runs from bees to ants, chimpanzees and humans. Everywhere it is there. Thank you. Yes, I think that book should be shared with all. There is a book, Jane Goodall, she's 91, as you mentioned, 91 years old now, spent all her life studying chimpanzees, and there is a book called Hope. We should appreciate the differences between chimpanzee society, human society. Human society gives us a lot of hope because of certain individuals who have really shone like bright stars, and they have. We will evolve. Right. Yes. Yes. Thank you for pointing out Secret Life of Ants by Richard Attenborough. Yes. So the difference is, look at human skeleton is inside our bodies, and for all insects the skeleton is exoskeleton. Now that, from a materialistic point of view, the evolution gets limited. Once you freeze the outer structure, the inner structure cannot change so much. Their evolution, so these insects, many of them have reached the final state of evolution 1 billion years ago. Nothing more has changed for them. Again, I mentioned the article by Schrödinger, which tries to illustrate this important point. Consciousness lies at the zone of evolution. And your gene mutations, because when we talk of evolution, people always think of mutations, alone cannot produce result. It is related to change of your habits, to what you make out of that mutation. If the habits are same, you may get wings, but you may not fly. So the idea that you should fly is an idea. What you can do with that mutation, but the mutations happen so slowly. So to appreciate it is not easy, exactly what is happening. Thank you. Wonderful lines. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? If not, thank you very much for the wonderful questions asked. It will give me seed for reflection. Also the nice books you have suggested. Thank you very much.
My daughter grew up here in the society for more than 6 years, 7 years. But for the initial years, she was close to the nature. She used to enjoy. We could see that she was enjoying the nature, but she was not speaking. And we were slightly worried. But then it so happened that our caretaker resigned, or she stopped coming. Then we had to put her in crush. Can you hear me? Then she started speaking, and I think it's a common story that everybody would have seen. What I mean to say is, breaking the bread, the concept that you had given us, the ability or by the virtue of association, you grow. And then Dr. Manu Jaiswal has taken us from the concepts of breaking the bread to colonization to breaking the discord, how we could actually change. And I would take a minute, since we have time. I'd like to narrate, because we are talking about ants. So in one of my presentations, I was looking at one research that was made. Ants go up they have a mountain hill that they build, and then they protect. There is one ant or two ants that stay outside the hill, the top of the mountain, and they close the last strand of the sand, and they remain outside because they can't go it and then close it from outside. They have to seal it with their liquid, and they know that they will be blown away in the night of the wind. They are not to be seen again. There are two more ants or one more ant that comes the next day to do the same job. That's the level of cooperation that they have. So this is all parts of, sense of cooperation to a kind of evolutionary pressures of overcoming that selfishness, right? That discord. And then my father used to ask me, one day he's asked me, very casually he brought me, and then he asked me, can you love a stranger? I did not dare to say this, but one thought came in, yeah, of course, if that is a young lady. I didn't say this. But I said, of course, yeah, stranger, it's good to have acquaintances. Then he was, in a very serious note, again he asked, can you love your enemy? Because he knew at the time that I was at a great discord with my colleague when I was working in the previous companies. He knew that there was a lot of turmoil. You will leave. This is only a temporary phase. God knows where you will be, which organization, where He will be which organization. You may or may not meet, but you will carry with you that sense of discord for life. Can you leave that? Now, can you leave it? He asked me. I said, I'll try, but I don't know, I can't promise. Just try, you may. Then the world will change around you. So it did change. Anyway, all this flashed upon my mind when Dr. Manu brought these wonderful concepts, both in terms of science in its evolution and also giving very phenomenal, realistic examples with research. So I cannot thank him more for triggering these thoughts. I'm sure I have had the opportunity to come onto the stage and I am expressing whatever I had, and all of you must have had similar triggers of thoughts. Anyways, so I would again thank Dr. Manu for being with us today, sharing wonderful experiences in spite of his busy schedules. And on behalf of Gandhi Nagar Lodge and Madras Theosophical Federation, I would like to thank you all, especially coming in person. We have been meeting online, but there's something different when we meet eye to eye and shake hand to hand and break that sweet, right? So thank you all for coming, and I'd like to make a couple of announcements. All of you must be members, those who are members of the Theosophical Society. We have stopped taking membership fees, but of course donations are welcome anytime. But what is required is that you have to write to us saying that you would like to continue your membership. That is one of the regulatory requirements that our Indian section of the Theosophical Society mandates us to do. So we would be reaching out to you. You just have to take that application form, take a printout, sign it and give it back to us. And that will retain your membership. That is only a formality. Membership is by heart more than the paper. Anyways, thank you very much. You have... Sorry? Yes, this is annually you have to do, not every month. Thank you for pointing out. Every year, then we will start, but we have a window of a few months. We might start as early as April and then it will go up to August, end of August. Okay. So thank you all. Thanks again, and the meeting is closed now.